I'm El Paso County Commissioner Sallie Clark, and I know that there have been ongoing questions about what's going on with the mitigation efforts that are taking place along Highway 24. So we tried to also bring in some folks to talk about various parts of the Highway 24 corridor, the flood mitigation related to the burn scar and the Waldo Canyon fire, and a number of other issues. So I wanted to thank you for being here tonight. Now I'm going to just talk a little bit about now that who's going to be speaking to us tonight. We have here, and you'll see them when they come up to give their presentations, from Colorado Department of Transportation, Karen Rowe, who where are you, Karen? There she is. She'll be speaking to you about what's going on with CDOT. Then we have from the United States Forest Service, we have Dana Butler. He's our resident hydrologist who spent a lot of time in our area. We'll have R.C. Smith here from El Paso County. R.C.'s got the blue shirt on back there. Some of you may have met him on your property at some point or seen him around looking at some of the projects that we're doing. Upcoming funding opportunities. Ian Hyde is here from the state. Ian, where did you go? There you are. Ian Hyde is with the state of Colorado, and there are some additional grants coming to Colorado with regard to emergency recovery, and Ian will kind of explain what the opportunities may exist for you with some assistance. Flood insurance overview is Amy Bach back there. She's from United Policyholders. Amy has been with us before. Their organization, which is a nonprofit, specializes in recovery efforts, and she's going to talk a little bit about where we are with flood insurance rates and then answer any other questions you may have about insurance as we go forward. And then we're just going to open it up for questions. I would also like to mention we have Leon Cott here from the Natural Resources Conservation Service. Leon, I know I just saw you back there. Anybody from our regular team that I didn't identify here? We have all our CDOT folks over here. So at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to Karen Rowe, who's going to talk about what's going to be going on with the highway and the new procedures that have been put in place in terms of closures. Thank goodness we're a little bit past, we hope, our monsoon season, but we know springtime comes sooner sometimes than we think. Even before winter ends, we could still end up with some water on Highway 24. So Karen, if you'd like to come up.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me today. I appreciate the invite and opportunity to update you on all the things we have done at CDOT. And I've heard that my staff has been here before to update you on projects that we have gotten completed. I'll probably rerun through projects that have been completed, and we've made some progress on some projects. Then also we have some more projects coming up, just a few more to help us not only help with the debris, but also to help with the closures on US 24. And then, like Commissioner Clark mentioned, we're going to have a little reprieve for a while. So we will be looking at, I'll talk about it a little bit more, but we'll be looking at reevaluating the procedures to close Highway 24 and see if there's some adjustment we can make to make that a little less frequent. So we just need to make sure that whatever decision we make, it's the best decision for the traveling public and for everybody's safety. I would like to introduce some of my staff that's here today, as really my job is to help set the direction and make sure we're on the right course, but they're the ones who get all the work done. So Kenny Quintana is from our maintenance. He watches all the storm clouds coming over the burn scar and lets us know when he needs to send up people for possible closure. Dave Watt here, he's with our engineering group, and he oversees all these projects that make sure they get done. And then Bob Wilson is from our public relations office, so he's also here to hear what you have to say. And also we just started a new website and a new communications plan for this pass. So I'll start with the presentation now. And this is just an overall view of all the drainage basins that are affected by the burn scar that come onto Highway 24. And the little squares down there are the mileposts along the highway. And then the names of the different basins are up on the left corner. So next slide. So these are all the projects we have gotten done. So you may have seen this before because a lot of these have been completed for a while now. But there are a lot of projects that either repaired the damage or are debris basins, meaning that they'll capture some of the debris that is coming down from the burn scar before it hits the highway, so it doesn't affect traffic as much. So Rainbow Falls, we restored. Waldo Canyon, we replaced that CBC as concrete box culvert. So it used to be a small pipe, it's now a big box opening, so it gets a lot more water through there. And then we built debris basins upstream from a lot of the areas. And we're just finishing up that Waldo Canyon debris basin right now. So the project we have coming up is the US 24 gate closure project. It's about $1 million, but it's so we can shut things down a little bit faster and at several different locations. And so there'll be signs that will let you know if the road's closed or if the road's opened, and it'll be at several different locations depending on where we need to close the road. So here's the options that we'll have on that road, the gate closure project. So at the Cave of the Winds is at one end, and then Fountain Avenue, it's up higher, up here where you guys are by Chipeta Park. Then in the past, we've also closed it at Cascade. So this is where we'll have several different, you can see the red and white signs here where there'll be road closure gates that can go down. And they can be operated not remotely like from Colorado Springs, but if we send one person up here, they can kind of pull lever or switch and all those will close at the same time. So some of the other projects that we still need to advertise is repair to Rainbow Falls Bridge. We're also going to get a consultant on board to help us analyze the drainage along this corridor, and with all the improvements we've made, what level storms, what level on the rain gauges does it need to hit in order for us to be concerned about flooding on the highway. So we're going to do that kind of analysis this winter and next spring, and that's where we're hoping that that analysis will inform us as to what decisions we can make in order to decide when to close the road. So now that all these improvements are in place, it'll give us time to look at that. So right now, this is our protocol to when we close US 24. You may have seen this before. Right now, if it's over, there's 3 conditions there. The National Weather Service issues a flash flood warning over the burn area drainage basins, and like I mentioned too, Kenny watches the storm clouds and coordinates with that National Weather Service to make sure that it's not just a flash flood warning that's issued to Colorado Springs, but actually over the burn scar that'll affect the highway. And then we have rain gauges out there. So if we have a 1/4 of an inch of rain that is measured on the rain gauges that gets sent out by cell phone, then we'll also look at closing the highway. Also, if we see debris on the road. So when there's a storm cell over the burn scar, we generally send a crew up here right away, a 3-man crew, and two are watching the highway ends to make sure it's closed, and one's driving back and forth to see if there's any debris that's coming down on the highway. So that's how it works right now. And then if there's 2 cases, if a mudslide occurs, that's one reason why we keep the highway closed. And so again, we're trying to communicate this out a little bit better as to when that happens versus when the flash flood warning has gone away, then we can open up the highway again. So if a closure happens because of debris, a lot of people say, well, why can't you one lane the highway when you close it? Well, again, if we're closing it because we're scared of flooding coming, one laning traffic isn't still not a good idea. We will only one lane traffic, like switch them over from one side to the other side, if we have a big debris event that we think will take more hours to clean the more than 4 hours to clean the highway. So it's not really worth it to put the traffic control in to switch traffic over unless it's going to be a long time that the highway's closed. Otherwise, it's just better to keep it closed, clear it off, and get the highway moving, get the traffic moving through the highway. Okay. So we came up with a communication plan recently. One of the things when I came on board, August 1st was my first day as region director. I do live here in Colorado Springs. I work in Pueblo and covered 9 counties in the Pueblo area. But I started to meet with the counties up here and listen to what are the concerns. Again, CDOT's been doing a lot of work. It's have we been getting the word out on all the work we've been doing. And also, people haven't seen, they still saw the highway closed all the time. And so they're like, well, is any progress being made? And also, when the highway closes, sometimes we don't find out whether it's open or not. So we have come up with a website. It's starting to get populated. We have put up something on our what's called the Governor Delivery System, which is, if you go to our website, coloradodot.info, there's a green cell phone. You can click on that, enter in your email address, enter your cell phone if you want texts, and sign up for alerts that you want. And there's a US 24 Ute Pass alert check mark. And they will send you an email when that pass is closed, and then they'll send you another email when it's open again. So that's one method that we're trying to do a little more timely notification on when the highway's closed and when it's open. And then we'll have the website, which will have all the project information and pictures up there. We're also going to try, once the flood season's over, to get the media out and show them all the progress we have been making with the debris basins, to show that this isn't something you're going to have to live with forever. We're making progress in the highway. We're working towards not closing the highway as much, making it safer for the traveling public so we don't have to close it as often as we have been. So our next steps is to set up meetings with communities like this one, community meetings to explain where we're at, tell you all the projects we've completed. We're going to evaluate this closure protocol after September 30th. And we're going to look at all the drainage along the corridor and see what other improvements might need to be made. We're going to keep collaborating with El Paso County and other partners, and we'll keep maintaining it. Part of the issue with these debris basins, too, is once an event happens and they fill up with all that dirt and mud, we got to go in and clean them out so that when the next event happens, that they won't be full. So again, the debris and mud just reduces our capacity for the rainfall to go through our system. So that's part of the problem, is we haven't built anything that can withstand any storm that comes. We're not quite there yet. So that's what I have tonight. I think, do we want to take questions now?
I think if we can move along and get through all the presentations, and then we'll have a lot of time, not a lot, but we'll have time at the end to answer any additional questions.
Okay.
That would be good.
All right.
Thank you very much, Karen. We really appreciate the work. CDOT has been just a great partner for us at El Paso County. I know sometimes all we do is seem like complain about what's happening, but they're really trying to balance that life safety issue over closing the road and keeping it reopened for economic purposes. So, I mean, if you don't mind, I'd like to give them a round of applause because I think they have been doing a great job. It's a tough position you're in, and I know Teller County on the other side feels pretty frustrated when they can't get down the mountain either. Next, I want to introduce Dana Butler from the U.S. Forest Service, but I also wanted to mention, too, that we appreciate the use of Ute Pass Elementary School and the school district, and also Terry Carver, who is, I see our principal back there, Chris, and then Terry Carver, she will be the incoming state representative for this House district. So Bob Gardner's district now, Terry Carver is the state representative-elect for this district. So I just wanted you to know who she is. So if you have any state issues, she's a good one to go to. She'll be hitting the ground running, I'm sure, in January. So Dana, I'd like to ask you to come on up and give us your presentation.
Sure.
Do you want me to hold something for you?
Oh no, I can just put this up here. I hope a lot of these pictures are also in the presentation. Okay. And am I just one of those? Hey there, I'm Dana Butler, and I am the Pike National Forest hydrologist, and I've been here since 2003. Came out originally to work on the Hayman wildfire restoration team, so I've seen a lot of what can happen and a lot of success, and I've learned a lot just right here in your community. So I do have kind of a brief presentation today, and I did leave some time because I want to make sure that I address your questions and really, rather than just present, which I could present probably for an hour and all the great things that are going on, but I want to make sure I really get at your questions and get a chance to answer those. So, some of the biggest work we've been doing is with hand crews. Last year was the heavy machinery, and we kind of knocked out just about everywhere we could get access to with heavy machinery. So this year is with the hand crews, and a big component of it is installing some stabilization structures and doing some reseeding. And you can see here that we've got quite a bit of vegetation coming back, and this is a place where we utilized straw wattles and seeding to kind of give a jump start to that revegetation. This here has straw wattles as well as log erosion barriers. Log erosion barriers are trees that have been limbed, and we use those kind of perpendicular to the flow of the water to slow down the water. What they also do is, not only do they slow down the water, but they kind of create this little pocket of moisture, and really helps that native seed that we're using for revegetation to get reestablished. You can also see here there's some rock in the foreground. Wherever possible, we utilize native rock. In this case here, there was some gullies forming at the outlets of the culverts. You'll hear me say this, it's kind of a common theme, but where we didn't have enough culverts, the infrequent ones that we had, they end up actually being forced to convey a lot more water, and that creates a lot more stream power and creates a lot more erosion. So this is along Rampart Range Road, and this is an area where we've done both that straw wattle, the log erosion barriers, and done some of those gully plugs with the rock. Additionally, we have cleaned out all of our drainage ditches and the cut slopes throughout the entire forest. Wherever we have this very erosive Pikes Peak granitic soils, they just rill and they turn into gullies, and we get head cuts, and they just are a source of sediment from here until forever. So we're really trying hard to come up with some techniques that will work to stabilize these cut slopes and also our fill slopes. So we've got a variety of erosion control matting that we're using out there, as well as a variety of seeding, and we're doing some monitoring to figure out which one's best. This is a case where you can see we've got log erosion barriers here, but also kind of in a U shape in the gullies, and they're designed to be overtopped, but still add some stability there to prevent head cutting. One comment on that last slide was we're utilizing a lot of CUSP crews, Coalition for the Upper South Platte, as well as we had the SWIFT prison crews out here, and those guys camped on site and just did an amazing job, so we really appreciate them. Let's see here, erosion control matting. Again, this is kind of a close-up of how we're trying to do these improvements. You'll notice that's a new culvert there that's been upsized. Historically, all across the forest, they just had 12-inch culverts or just really undersized culverts, so they just don't have that capacity and they get overwhelmed. So this year we've been concentrating on trying to improve the infrastructure, so that way when we do open it up, it'll be safe for you guys to travel on. This is an example on the outlet where a lot of times on the forest you'll see those shotgun culverts where the culvert sticks out over the hill slope, and there's a lot of energy that ends up on the hill slope and creates a big gully. So we've spent a lot of time trying to pack in rocks, but also not disturb the vegetation that's there. Big component of the work we do is noxious weed eradication, or try to control it the best way we can. So we do an inventory out here, and we're doing quite an aggressive weed treatment out here, so that way it doesn't spread throughout the forest. We know a lot of it's right adjacent to the road, and we're trying to prevent it from going any further. Hazard trees, we know in the Hayman fire that really they can fall at any time, which is one of the reasons why this area is so dangerous. I will say that we haven't had any injuries that I'm aware of on the forest this year, which is just excellent because we've put people on very steep hill slopes where there's certainly tripping hazards, but also where the trees can injure people as well as the volunteers. So I think I should say that we're very happy that that hasn't happened. But we've got our fire crews, our hot shots, and our regular engine crews out here whenever they're not off fighting fires in other locations, trying to clear all the black trees, all the danger trees that are adjacent to our roads and trails. We've also got monitoring. This is a sediment detention basin that's up on the forest in Williams Canyon, and we're monitoring both longitudinal profiles, so up and down the creek and across the creek, how quickly they're filling up. And you can see that there's some vegetation around it, and we really feel like creating these basins help promote the water table to be up a bit higher rather than down at the bottom of a gully. And the quickest way we'll get back to a natural hydrograph, so natural flood patterns, I guess, is by having vegetation out on those hill slopes. So I guess I just want to say, what's it like out there? Well, there's a lot of fallen trees, I've been out there and heard 2 trees come down in just 30 seconds. We know that there is still the flood potential. These guys are working how to handle those flood flows. We're trying to hold back some of it the best way we can up there, but we also know that from being around here, and a lot of you folks have lived around here, that there's still going to be a dangerous situation. We're working a lot right now on putting up warning signs and especially fencing, so that way we can keep people perhaps in a safe area and not have them go unknowingly into a dangerous situation. Okay, that's it. And I definitely want to answer questions because I'm sure you guys have them, but we'll just hold them to the end.
Thanks very much.
Now I'm going to call on R.C. Smith, our El Paso County Recovery Manager for Waldo Canyon. He also attends the Waldo Canyon Regional Recovery Group meetings with me. We have a collaborative group that meets once a month that includes a lot of these partners here and even more, that talks about all the various projects that we're doing. So, RC, I'm going to hand you the mic.
Okay, one of the things I want to talk about, there are several areas. One of the things I wanted to kind of put a little more emphasis on, since we've had other people talking, is all the people that have to come together in a recovery effort. And you're going to hear from Ian Hyde from the State Recovery Office, but you've heard from Dana from the Forest Service. The most effective work is the work we can do highest up the slope. Well, that's the Forest Service property. The other thing that Dana hit on, and I'm glad he did, and it kind of fits in with what the Commissioner was saying about the Office of Emergency Management, is to keep people safe. They have to restrict access to the forest when those trails aren't safe and stuff. And the reality of it that is most of those calls come to the Commissioner, and somehow they come from the Commissioner to me. And I don't look like a forester, but we try to explain that to people. And what the Commissioner said about CDOT, they've spent tens of millions of dollars, putting in that culvert, trying to be as vigilant as possible, watching public safety, but also keeping the road open. Okay, the other parts that I work more with are like the state OEM office, and the Commissioner introduced Leon Cott in the back there from the Natural Resource Conservation Service. We get grant money from them called Emergency Watershed Protection money. That is one of the rare types of federal money that can be used on private property. And a good example of one of the projects we've got going is in Cascade, and that channel stabilization and the sediment catch basin at the top of that, which will be a cleanable basin, which we'll be able to remove sediment from, as it continues to come down from the Pyramid Mountain area. So hopefully, we're protecting Topeka Avenue, we're protecting the library at the bottom, the fire station, and then work with collaborating with CDOT on an entrance into the drainage there under 24 across the road from across the road from Wines of Colorado. The other people that we work with, I talked about the NRCS and EWP money, is the state OEM office and hazard mitigation grant program money, which we look at properties that are going to be subject to repetitive flood damage, where it would not be cost effective to continue repairing those properties, and work out a scenario where we can use grant money to purchase the properties. And then what we do is we either put some type of protection in that property for further downstream or leave it as open space. And right now we have 4 properties pending. I saw one gentleman coming in from out front, and we've been working on it since Ian was in the Office of Emergency Management and moved to recovery, so well over a year. So we're hoping to get those done. So like I said, those properties and those people won't be subject to repetitive damage, which just isn't cost effective to repair. So you talk about the state office OEM and then talk about FEMA, did the damage assessments initially, and we work and partner with them to try to do emergency repairs. So there's a lot of different moving parts to recovery and a lot of expense, and the reality is a lot of time. The other thing that I would like to talk about that fits in with, excuse me, the commissioner was on TV at lunchtime today. This is National Preparedness Month. The 30th is considered the Prepare-a-thon. And the number one thing that FEMA's encouraging people to do this year is just have some kind of plan with your family members. And the thing that kind of stuck out to us is because we have had this threat of repetitive flooding where people either can't get down to the springs or can't get back to Manitou or can't get back up the hill to Woodland Park and they get stuck in Manitou, just talk to your family members. If you're going to be separated, try to arrange some safe place for them to go, especially if your children are at school or something, where you can call them. Because in most of those events, phones work. The other thing we encourage people to do is text on their cell phone because it takes less capacity. And people can overrun a cell system when everybody's concerned and they get on their cell phone. So just a couple parting thoughts from me. When you're thinking about the highways closed, as vigilant as CDOT has been about it, it still could happen. And when it does, talk about that ahead of time, not when it's happening or you're stuck in traffic on 24. Know that your loved ones or your children are going someplace safe and that you'll know where they are and that they'll know where you are. So, and I'll be here for questions at the end. We'll set up some chairs up here and everybody come up and you can ask me about other county programs. The other thing I wanted to talk about is we just, on the preparedness side, is we've just got some grant money from the Department of Natural Resources from the state to do fuel mitigation work. Part of it's going to be in the Fox Run Regional Park out in Black Forest, and part of it was awarded to Black Forest Together, and they have to bring private property owners together in, I think it's a minimum of 40-acre lot sizes. So there has to be 8 property owners that agree on what that mitigation is. And those dollars come to us from the Department of Natural Resources, but they're a 1-for-1 match, so the property owner has to come in to that too. The other thing I would say about the state, and Ian can address it more thoroughly, is the governor on a lot of the match money that we get, there's a 25% match from the county, and the state picked up 12.5% of that. Because on a lot of these grants, the grant for the channel and cascade and that sediment basin was over $1 million. It was also an EWP grant that's helping build the Williams Canyon Channel outside of Manitou. And that's just a fraction of that. There's also a mineral impact grant, and I'm not sure where the other money is, but there's still match money that needs to come up. And that project is going to be probably a $5 million project to try to protect Manitou. So again, a lot of partners, a lot of moving parts, a lot of people that have worked really collaboratively with the county. And like I said, particularly the state, when they pick up half of a 25% match from the county, that gives us more money to do more work. So, but I'll be up at the end to answer questions, and I'm not sure who's up next, Commissioner Clark. I can. Oh, well, since I was talking about Ian, and we got to know. Yeah, come on down. It's like The Price is Right. We got to know each other because I started for the county July 29th of 2013, and the first flood was like August 8th. But I promise it wasn't my fault. Okay. This is Ian Hyde from the State Recovery Office.
Thanks, RC, and I'm glad to be here. And I was also glad to provide some of the entertainment trying to get this thing down a little bit earlier. Good to start off on a good note. Yeah, my name is Ian Hyde. I'm the Deputy Chief Recovery Officer with the Colorado Recovery Office, and I wanted to mostly talk to you about some upcoming flood recovery resources, but they also happen to apply to the fires that we had both in 2012 with Waldo Canyon and with the Black Forest Fire in 2013. If we can jump to the next slide. I just want to talk for a brief second about what our office does because we're very, very new. We were created by the governor in the week after the September floods, recognizing the size and scope of the flood event that we had. And so we work directly for the governor's office, and we have some three major priorities. The first one is just to set priorities for the long-term recovery process and make sure that our state agencies are all aligned in the support that they're providing to communities. We also are here to deliver results with a sense of urgency, and what does that mean? That means both in the immediate recovery process from the floods and the wildfires as well, but also we're a year out from the floods, we're 2 years out from the wildfire, and we want to make sure folks know that all of the state agencies still have a great sense of urgency about the recovery process, but also for preventing future damages as well. So getting into what the state as a whole is doing to support flood recovery efforts, one of the first things we're trying to do is advocate for resources. You've heard about the Natural Resources Conservation Service funds. You'll hear me talk about community development block grant funds a little bit later, partnering with nonprofits, foundations, and others, looking at other federal funding opportunities. And so a lot of our focus is continuing to understand where the needs are from these disasters that we've had and to advocate for further resources. Another thing that the state has done, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, is supporting watershed master planning. And how many of you are familiar with the effort that's going on Fountain Creek through the Fountain Creek Greenway District? So we've got a couple, but certainly for those that aren't familiar with it, I encourage you to try to get engaged, particularly if you've got watershed issues or issues along Fountain Creek or tributaries, because that'll be an important process for one of the resources I talk about in a minute. I'll try to look that up before I leave. It's, I believe, the Fountain Creek Greenway District, and perhaps RC will be able to find that information as well. The state's providing some technical assistance. I'll get into some technical information that we're trying to provide and resources through multiple agencies. You've heard about all the great work that CDOT's doing as well, and there are a number of other agencies. A lot of what I'm going to talk about tonight are community development block grants that came from HUD after the flood disaster, but again, they apply to the wildfire disasters as well. And so the point that you've heard from RC and others is just that flood and wildfire recovery requires coordination from a lot of different agencies, from a lot of different levels, federal, state, local, nonprofit, and others. And so we're focused on being a partner on those teams and, again, trying to maintain that sense of urgency. So community development block grants, how many folks have heard about these or attended our public hearings that we had about a month ago? Okay, so this is actually good that you guys haven't heard about this because we want to continue to get the word out about that. The funds are intended to address continuing unmet needs that aren't met by FEMA, Small Business Administration, or others. And we know that there's a significant amount of need that kind of falls through the cracks. There's only so much that any one agency is able to provide. So what we've done with the allocations that the state has received so far is identify programs for housing, for infrastructure, for economic revitalization, agriculture, and planning, and then we've just added a new watershed resilience program that I'll talk about in a minute as well. We've received a first allocation that was restricted only to the September floods, and I know that there are a lot of other disasters that have happened down here. But one thing we were very glad to see with the second allocation that we received is that those funds can apply to previous disasters that have been presidentially declared, and what that means is it applies to Waldo Canyon. It applies to Black Forest Fire. That second allocation we received was for $199 million. We do have to spend 80% of those funds up north in Weld, Larimer, and Boulder counties, but there are still remaining funds for the other disaster-impacted communities in the state. So we actually have to develop an action plan. It's a fairly extensive document that outlines the activities and the eligibility for what we do, as well as have a fairly robust public process. We just turned in the action plan update for the $199 million on September 5th, and we're looking at about a 60-day review period before HUD approves that action plan. After that, we'll start to roll out some of those programs. So on to the next one, I'll talk about what they are. First one I'll talk about is our housing program. The first thing I'll say is one of the questions we want to and need to answer is how can you as individual residents with housing needs access that? The way those funds have been delivered through the first allocation is that we're passing state or the CDBG funds down to local housing authorities who then work directly with individual residents who may have a long-term housing need from the disasters. Some of the services that are provided, temporary rental assistance for folks that have had to move to a new place and might not have the means to do so because of the disaster, some down payment assistance. We're able to help pay for some housing repairs if you've had damage to your foundation or your house or otherwise from the floods. And we're also funding some new construction if there's an identified need for that, and that's again delivered generally through those housing authorities. So the eligible applicants are actually local governments, but the point is that we're trying to get that money to the local community so they can then work with residents to access that. So once the action plan is approved, we're going to put information up on our website, which is coloradounited.com. We're also going to work closely with RC and Commissioner Clark and others to get that information out so that you know where you can go to potentially access those funds if you've got needs that meet the criteria for the program. So next. Another program under these community development block grants that's important is the infrastructure program. Now this won't be dollars that can be passed down to individual homeowners, but it's money that can go to local governments to implement infrastructure repair projects, or more importantly down here, both post-wildfire mitigation projects and flood mitigation projects. And so we've got a whole range of resources that we can put in there. We've allocated just about $60 million statewide from the second allocation for infrastructure. Again, 20% of that being available to counties outside of those three up north. So we'll be working closely with El Paso County, Manitou Springs, others to try to identify some of those projects and support applications for that.
Excuse me, Ian.
Yes.
Just Teller County.
I believe Teller County was included in the Waldo Canyon declaration, so I believe that they can come in for that as well if it relates to that disaster. Yes. So on to the next one. So do we have any small businesses in here that have been impacted by the fire or the floods? Okay, well, we do have some programs for small businesses as well, grants and loans. Grants can be for up to $50,000, and funding beyond that would have to be in the form of a loan. But another thing that we're trying to do with this funding is to support technical assistance to businesses to be able to do some preparedness planning, and to also do some workforce training if there's a need for that as well to support some economic diversification. So that's another resource that we're trying to roll out with this. And then finally, the program I wanted to talk a fair amount about and why it's important for us to get out information about the watershed master planning process is we've created a new watershed resilience pilot program. And it's really designed around the concepts of these master plans. And what the master plans do is bring individual residents, businesses, local governments, and nonprofits and others together, those that have a stake in the state of the watershed, to plan collaboratively and identify projects to both do some environmental restoration, but also to reduce risk. And those projects may or may not be on private property, but the idea being that we're wanting to try to comprehensively look at the watershed and repair those. So the first step is that we're trying to build some capacity with these watershed coalitions that have been coming up, so we'll pay for some staffing. We're also paying for some planning efforts so that more of this collaborative planning and projects can be identified. And if there are projects that are identified through that master planning process, then we're setting aside funding to be able to actually implement those projects. So if you as an individual resident have a stake in the watershed, please try to connect with that process. Likewise, I know that the county, Manitou Springs, Colorado Springs, others are all involved in that process, and we're trying to support that collaborative effort. So another thing that I just wanted to add is obviously one of the most critical things is trying to fund actual projects that reduce risk or help you to recover at the end of the day. But information is also incredibly important as a part of that process, and we're trying to continue to collect better information to understand what the risks are and how agencies, both locally or at the state, can use that information to better reduce those risks. So we're currently working with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to get some LIDAR data, and basically what LIDAR is they take a flight over a certain area and they're able to get really detailed topography information, which then helps with either design or engineering or with floodplain mapping or otherwise. So the state is paying for half of this effort. The Army Corps is paying for half of this effort as well. And we did specifically request that the watersheds impacted by the Waldo Canyon fire be included in this. So whether it's CDOT or whether it's El Paso County or others that want to access this information, once it's been processed and has gone through all the quality control it needs to, that'll be made available to those agencies to be able to use. So looking forward, we're going to continue to advocate for resources, provide technical assistance, and we're also looking to work with the communities to continually track where we are with this recovery process and again maintain that sense of urgency. On the next slide, you'll have my contact information. I'll stick around afterwards, but certainly I can be contacted as well, and I'll be happy to answer questions during the question and answer.
Very much. In just a second, I'm going to introduce Amy Bach, but we have a couple of folks here as well that I wanted to introduce. Sorry. Pete, now I'll mispronounce this, Boygich, he's right there. He's with our budget office, so he help coordinate with Brian Olson a lot of the grants that we're receiving to make sure everything is coordinated appropriately. We have John Chavez back here as well. He's wearing the red shirt. He's working very hard on the mitigation projects up in this area. In fact, he said he was a little late to the meeting because he was up in Sand Gulch looking at a project. And Joel Cavillan, really appreciate Joel as our public information officer here tonight, and Nancy Nelson, who's running the video. So thank you. Did I miss any of our county staff? Now I'd like to introduce Amy Bach, and and we have Tyler Stevens, trustee with Green Mountain Falls. So thanks, Tyler, for being here. Tyler's also on the Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments board with me, and on the Pikes Peak Rural Transportation Authority board. Amy Bach will kind of give you a little quick background about herself, I'm sure, when she comes up here, but she's going to talk to us about the changes that are happening in flood insurance. And we want to also find out if any of you have had difficulties with insurance renewals. So Amy, if you want to come on up here. United Policyholders is a nonprofit organization. So they rely on grants and other sources. They're not here to sell insurance policies. They're here to advocate for homeowners and businesses.
Thank you, Sally, and all the friends here in the room that I've had the privilege of working with since our organization has been working in Colorado since the 4 Mile Canyon fire in Boulder in 2010. And then we found it so pleasant and productive to work in Colorado and made some very good relationships with county officials up there. When the Waldo Canyon fire hit, we connected with Sally and her team and El Paso County, and brought our resources in on the recovery side, and then again for the Black Mountain community. And how could you, I'm sorry, Black Forest, and how could you not love this amazing area? And I wish, I could say that I could come and stay and enjoy all the beauty that you have, the sometimes treacherous beauty. But I have 2 kids, and I'll be zooming back to San Francisco tomorrow. But I'm very, very envious that you have the kind of elected official that you have in Sallie Clark. I'm living in a city right now that has a very, very contentious kind of government that they just can't, seem to agree on anything. And, Sallie has just been rock solid. I mean, your concerns are her concerns. The governor has been fantastic. Signed a homeowner's bill of rights that gives you some rights with your homeowner's insurance. Very, very important. So who am I and who are we? I do not sell flood insurance. I've never sold insurance. I never will sell insurance, but I know a ton about insurance. I'm an insurance consumer advocate, like a Ralph Nader, but only for insurance. And I run a national 501c3, so like the Red Cross, we get grants. You can go to the first slide, please. We get grants and donations, and we sell books, and that's how we are funded. We do not take any money from insurance companies on purpose, so that when we have to be critical of them, which we sometimes have to be, we don't feel any conflicts. And I do have a lot of agents and brokers that advise us, and I'm very grateful for their expertise. And in fact, when we did a flood insurance educational program in Manitou Springs a year ago, we had a flood insurance broker, a gentleman out of Denver who sells it, very knowledgeable. So, there's lots of information to be had. These are the 3 programs that we run. The Roadmap to Recovery is what we've been doing in Black Forest for the last year. We just wrapped up a year of monthly workshops helping people get from point A to point H back home as much as possible. The Roadmap to Preparedness is what brings me here today, because what happens with us, we've been around since 1991. Our strongest suit is helping people with wildfire recovery, but we've been doing a lot of flood recovery. We are wrapping up some work in New Jersey and New York from Superstorm Sandy, which was, for most people, a purely flood loss, not wind like Katrina. So most of the people who were hit hard by Sandy did not have flood insurance. A lot of people did not. They didn't live in a flood zone. Their lender didn't require them to have it. So this business with the community block grants that Ian was talking about, honestly, is a little bit of a new-ish phenomenon, meaning that that people after Sandy who got flooded and didn't have insurance, didn't have private insurance, were hurting so badly that, I don't know, the history of it, but suddenly these community block grants, community development block grants, started to be an option for the communities to help. Not for individual assistance, but things like elevating, cost to elevate homes, and that sort of, as Ian was saying, infrastructure kind of stuff to make your dwelling safer. Okay, so I want to get into the meat. When we do the recovery work, that's where we see the gaps in insurance, and that has led us to doing a lot of work helping people sift through facts, rumors, fantasy, delusion, and denial, and make good decisions about protecting their assets via buying private insurance. And as wonderful as these government programs are, there's always some politics involved. There's one theme, right? When you've been hit by a loss and your house is damaged or destroyed and your stuff is ruined and what do you need? Everybody needs one thing: money, right? And the fastest source of money is your own insurance, generally speaking. It is, contractually owed to you. And that is very different from government programs where you have to apply and wait and be eligible and all that. So as far as a source of cash, you can't beat insurance. And I want to say flood insurance is not the easiest sell. And I get that. But you got to make informed decisions, and that's why I'm here, to help you make an educated decision whether or not to buy it, not say it's a ripoff, or somebody told me that they had it and it didn't help, or I heard this, I heard that. Okay, I want each of you to make a decision for your property based on where you live, how much equity you have in your home, how likely it is that you might have flood damage, how much it would cost You, okay? And those are individual decisions, so not to be made on third-hand information. Okay, what are your options? Well, you can buy it through this combo public-private program called the National Flood Insurance Program, NFIP. And interestingly enough, there are private flood policies out there. They're mostly sold through Lloyd's of London companies. Lloyd's of London is this giant syndicate with lots of little arms and companies. You can buy flood insurance through them. It is not through the NFIP. But, you know, I picked up a piece of information from the Rocky Mountain Insurance Information Association. So they're like a PR arm of the insurance industry in Colorado. Their job is to get the word out to you, the public, from the insurance industry's perspective. The only flood insurance they talk about is through the NFIP. I'm not exactly sure why. Maybe because the Lloyd's companies aren't members of their organization. I don't know. So I want to tell you, you do have a choice. There are also private policies issued by what they call themselves high-end. That's a euphemism for wealthy people, but high-end. Okay, so Chubb, AIG, ACE. So they actually don't. Some of them don't exclude flood. So if you have if you have the means and you have a nice enough house, you know, you get a quote from one of those companies, and then you'd have a lot more protection. DIC, difference in conditions, wraparound riders and extras. You got to ask. You know, insurance is like everything else. You can talk to one guy and he'll tell you what he knows. You know, one agent, one broker, he'll tell you what he knows. You can talk to another one, she might tell you something else because that's what she knows. Different agents and brokers work for different companies. So you really kind of have to ask more than one person, all right? Lender or force-placed flood insurance. That's where you live in a zone that is designated a federal flood zone of some kind, and you have a mortgage, and your lender says, sorry, you let your insurance lapse, or you didn't want to buy it, I'm buying it for you, and guess who's going to pay for it? You, out of your mortgage. It's going to make your mortgage go up, and you know what? That is the worst ripoff, force-placed flood. It's very expensive, it doesn't cover a lot, you really want to avoid that if you can. Okay, next. So everyone lives in a flood zone. That's a very common saying around people like me who seem to find themselves in near disasters a lot. Storm surges, you know, that's where the waves come up during a storm. Burn scar induced flooding, which is what y'all are having. Overflowing bodies of water, you've had that too. Rising water that enters a structure not through a hole from an accidental event. Why do I say that? Listen, insurance companies, you know, they're great at coming up with cute, funny ads, right? Great. Funny, you know, the gecko, the woman, you know, bashing the candy, that's the new one, the Candy Crush. But, you know, they're also, you know what they're great at? They are great at hiring smart lawyers. And they are great at hiring smart lawyers who write very specific wording into their policies. And what are they worrying about these days? Water and climate change and drought and all those, you know, scary things. So they are tightening up the wording in the policies, and you will see more wording like that. That, okay, there's my home, there was a storm, and water came in. Well, you're going to have to show, if you're going to get coverage, that there was a hole, that the wind blew a hole, or a tree blew a hole, or glass blew out, and the water got in that way, right? So that's somewhat new, some more restrictions there, all right? Water from overwhelmed or blocked culvert, sewer, water lines. Well, you know, okay, around here you've got some really kicking butt public officials, federal, state, local, getting your infrastructure up to speed. But you know, a lot of infrastructure in the United States is aging, so it is becoming increasingly common for there to be water events from pipes. Okay, and insurers are right behind these developments, tightening up their policy language. Okay, the myth of the feds on a white horse. The FEMA individual assistance grants. Did anybody here apply for one after the flooding? Any flooding? No. Okay. So a lot of people don't buy. Did you get the maximum 32? You did. So But for a FEMA individual assistance grant, there must have been something else you got, because the absolute max you can get is 32 for that. That doesn't have to be paid back, okay? And then you can borrow up to 250,000 from the SBA, but of course you have to pay that back. You know what? Floods are very dirty, hazardous messes to clean up. Charitable aid is in short supply and high demand. You know, you really, there is some help. You heard from Ian with elevation mitigation grants, but private insurance delivers the cash, some cash. Maybe not every dollar that you need, but some cash. So, I mean, all things being equal, if you can afford to buy flood insurance, you buy it. That's kind of the simple message I'm here to say. Next, please. Thanks. Okay, so for, why am I here? I would love everybody in this room to never be affected by a flood or a wildfire. But the reality is, chances are, with the burn scar, you could be, right? And the purpose of tonight is to reward you for coming out on a weeknight and sitting here and listening to people talking by actually having you go home and get yourself in a better position to be more resilient than you were before you came to the meeting. Or you can pat yourself on the back and say, I've been doing all the things those people said. Great, okay? If you're a homeowner, a business owner, or a renter, you have options. You want to find out what they are. If a broker or an agent says to you, oh, you can't get flood insurance, go somewhere else. Or if you go to somebody and they say, the only option you have is $12,000 a year, go someplace else, go 3 places. Check out this guy, Matt Herr in Denver, who specializes in flood insurance. Very easy to find him. His agency is called Flood Insurance Services. Herr is the last name. He doesn't donate money to my organization. He knows a lot about flood insurance. So I give out his name because I think the guy knows his stuff. And he will give you options. He sells the Lloyd's policies, he sells NFIP. Some agents do specialize, like him, in flood insurance, but I gotta tell you that the majority of insurance agents out there don't specialize in it. They don't like to sell it because they don't understand the NFIP program. They get nervous about it. They are afraid they're going to mess up the application or give somebody wrong information, and they may discourage you. Oh, you don't need that. Because, they know who wants to spend money on insurance. I certainly don't. But, it is one of those necessary, I don't even want to call it an evil, but it's just a necessity of modern life. All right. So, we want to help you make informed decisions, and I get that, some of you may think, well, she's talking out of 2 sides of her mouth, because she's talking about insurance companies and their lawyers and all this and their excuses, but she's also telling us maybe we should buy it. I'm not saying maybe, I'm saying that you should, if you can afford it and you live in this area. All right, because what? No flood insurance means you're carrying 100% deductible if you have a flood. That means the whole thing is on you, and if you're lucky, you might get some money, but you don't know when it's going to come. I can tell you there's a lot of people in New Jersey that are still waiting for their money from the feds, and Sandy was in 2012. Okay, and that's not a knock on the federal government. It's just that when there's a lot of people waiting in line, it takes a while, all right? Hurricane insurance in coastal areas now, you have to buy a separate policy for hurricanes if you live in an area that has hurricanes, right? What do they cost? About $2,000 to $12,000 annually? I know. Earthquake insurance in California costs between $2,000 and $8,000. That's why hardly anyone has it. I have it, but I'm a nerd. What can I say? But no, I've done the analysis. I know how much equity I have in my house. I know what my soil is. It's kind of sandy. I know how old my house is, and I've done a lot of shopping, and I got it down to the price I thought I could afford. Flood insurance can cost as little as $300 annually, but it can be in the thousands. I'm not going to mislead or sugarcoat. But it's comparable to what people pay in other areas based on what their weather risks are. Okay. So again, rumors will not protect your assets, right? I just want you all to make decisions based on reliable information and your individual property characteristics, not rumors, third hand, or biased opinions, okay? Somebody had a bad experience with their flood claim. That's their experience. That doesn't mean it's going to be the same for you, okay? So briefly, You may have heard a lot about the NFIP, or you may have heard nothing about the NFIP, that the rates were going to go up. Well, Congress stepped in and reformed the reform, so the rates shouldn't be too much higher than what they had been around here. If you apply and you're told that you're in a higher risk zone, flood zone than you think you should be, you can appeal, okay? And then you got to know what you get when you buy flood insurance and what you don't get. You don't get the temporary rent that you get from a home policy. There's a $250,000 cap. Garages, decks, finished basements are excluded. They will pay for the structural elements of your basement, but not carpeting or stuff that was in the basement. And then contents is optional next. All right, so I'm not going to, I think I've gone on probably, I was getting a little bit of the hook sign back there. But I mean, you know, I'm not going to sugarcoat. The NFIP is what it is. It's a political fix to a problem. The private insurers decided in the 1960s that they were not going to sell flood insurance anymore, period. So the government had to step in and create this program, and it's a hybrid. It's better than not having any, that is for sure. Okay? Next. We're going to move on. Okay, so drought, climate change, and extreme weather risks. What are reinsurers? Reinsurers are the highest level of insurance on top of insurance. So they really are the puppeteers. They are the big boys that have the big money. So when there is a catastrophe and there's millions or billions, they provide that backstop for insurance companies. And they tell insurance companies how they want them to behave. And right now, they're a little nervous. They're a lot nervous. And so how many of you have gotten a non-renewal notice from your homeowner's insurance in the last couple of years? Okay. So that is somewhat of an issue in this area. And why? Because some insurers, like Allstate, are saying, you know, I think there's been a couple wildfires out there flooding, we're nervous. So the marketplace is changing a little bit, but not to worry yet, and hopefully you won't have to. You know, you have some very strong.
How many more slides do you have?
I think this might be the last, second to last. Keep going. Keep going. That's it. Yeah, that's it. So, I mean, basically, our website is a great place to go for information all the time. Uphelp.org, we're always updating it. We have a buying tip section, we have articles, we have links, and pictures of people you might know from our workshops here. So thank you for your time. I'm looking forward to answering any questions. And again, it's great that you're here absorbing this important information. Thanks, Sally.
Thank you very much, Amy. I wanted to also introduce Shelley Cabot, who's at the back of the room. She's got a blue jacket on. She works directly for RC, so when I email RC, then it probably gets to Shelley as well. But we've also got folks here. John Chavez, I don't know if you have anything you want to share, but I want to see if there's questions as well. Did you want John to say a couple things?
About the Fountain Creek Master Plan.
Fountain Creek Master Plan.
John is our stormwater engineer in the county, but he is on that board. Fountain Creek.
Watershed.
Flood
control and greenway
and Greenbelt Improvement District.
Not quite. Fountain Creek Watershed, Flood Control and Greenway District.
Flood control and green. I'm getting married.
Technically, I'm not on the board. The board is comprised of elected officials from El Paso, Pueblo counties. I do serve as the chairman for the Technical Advisory Committee, and I provided a lot of input on the scope for the contract of the Watershed Master Plan project that Ian and RC alluded to. Just real briefly, the Watershed District was formed in about 2007, and its sole purpose is to provide oversight and protection for the Fountain Creek Watershed. The Fountain Creek Watershed extends from the top of Woodland Park all the way down to the confluence of the Fountain Creek with the Arkansas River in Pueblo. So it's a large area. Given that it is made up of multiple political jurisdictions, it's a very difficult arena to work within because you have multiple stakeholders with multiple priorities, and clearly Pueblo experiences a different reality when it comes to flooding than what may happen in Chapita Park or in Manitou Springs. So it's a very dynamic group with the mission to protect and implement measures within the watershed to protect the watershed from flood control, from flooding, and also to enhance the recreational opportunities within the watershed via the Greenway District aspect. So they're also responsible for education, trails, so forth and so on. The master plan. It is being funded by Ian's group, in addition to some local matches that are being provided by Pueblo, El Paso County, and a variety of different municipalities that are all pitching in. The purpose of this project, as all of you know, with the Waldo Canyon fire that occurred back in 2012, after the fire there was a lot of studying done relative to the burn severity, the areas of the burn, and the hydrology, the nature of the water coming off of the burn area. So that area of the watershed has been studied fairly extensively in the last couple of years. In addition to that, with our partners at the Coalition for the Upper South Platte, with the Forest Service work, and with a lot of local efforts, we've been implementing literally hundreds of mitigation efforts on Forest Service land and private property. The watershed master planning effort that is currently underway is looking at that section of the Fountain Creek watershed that was not studied under the Waldo Canyon burn area. So what we're looking at is from Sand Gulch up to the Teller County line, up to the top of the headwaters, if you will. And they're also looking at Cheyenne Creek. With the flooding that we had in September of 2013, as for those of you who live up this far up the canyon, you recognize that there were some impacts, some flooding impacts. So what this effort is going to try to do is going to take all of the information that we've learned post-fire in the Waldo Canyon burn area. It's going to collect additional water quality and, excuse me, not water quality, hydrology and some hydraulics calculations and modeling in Cheyenne Creek, which is over by the Broadmoor. That experienced quite a bit of water. And then, just like I said, the upper stretch. So I call it somewhat of a gap analysis of hydrology around the burn area, but it really isn't a gap analysis. They're incorporating the information that was derived from the Waldo Canyon burn area and going to include it with new information, similar information that is currently being developed for that stretch above Sand Gulch and in Cheyenne Creek. And based on what that modeling data tells us, we're going to identify mitigation efforts and put together a master plan that will cover the entire watershed from basically the top in Teller County down to the confluence and beyond south of Fountain. Yes, sir.
What about the area from Sand Creek, going down to and through Cascade?
With the area from Sand Gulch on down through Cascade, and actually all the way down through Manitou Springs, was extensively studied under the Waldo Canyon burn area. Yeah, there was a burn area analysis report, they call it the BEAR report, and that pretty much was the very first thing that they did. Using flyover and satellite data, they determined the areas of severe burns, so there's low, moderate, and high burn areas. Then based on that data, a series of USGS and I believe US Forest Service hydrologists started to do the calculations to determine how much water is going to start flowing off of this mountain now that there's no vegetation left on it. So there was an extensive study. Now clearly, outside the burn area, it's a different dynamic. I mean, we're not dealing with the burn area dynamic. So that's why this is somewhat of a comprehensive approach. We're going to look at reality in 2014 and 2015 and put together a master plan based on that reality. Because I don't need to tell the folks that live in this canyon, the reality today is different than the reality prior to June of 2012 relative to flooding. That's a given. So that's the purpose of the master plan. It should be published. It should be published in the summer of 2015. And one other aspect that is included in that is not included in the BEAR analysis or any of the hydrology analysis, there is going to be a very brief water quality survey done, and it's going to be more anecdotal than monitoring. We're not going to implement a monitoring plan, but there's going to be some boots on the ground that walk through the stream and identify obvious sources of pollution contributing to the water quality impairments in the main stem. So not monitoring, but you can pretty much look and see what's contributing to pollution, and that's the effort.
I was along Fountain Creek, and the majority of the damage done on property from flooding has been because of Woodland Park's flooding more so than Sand Gulch. Is there any catch pond or anything planned to go in up by Grisola, try to alleviate some of that water that's coming out?
That will be an outcome of this master planning effort. I can't tell you. Well, it'll be done in a year. I can't tell you there are definitely going to be plans because we have to go through the process. Interestingly, I will point out something that I observed. There's a lot of water coming off of the south side of the highway downstream from Woodland Park. So I don't necessarily agree that it's all coming from Woodland Park. There's a significant contributor coming in downstream. Yes, ma'am.
So are any citizens on any of these committees or studies or, I mean, it sounds like the experts, the central government is doing all this for us.
No, absolutely. Citizens are welcome. In fact, there was a series of public meetings that were held, one in this particular location, a couple months back, to get input on the draft approach. But there are monthly meetings. All public stakeholders are welcome, and if you'd like to attend, I will give you my card, and you contact next week. There's a meeting coming up in 2 weeks. I'll be happy to give you the information. But certainly the public is welcome, and they're encouraged. We're wanting that input.
And there's also a Citizens Advisory Committee that's part of that. So you have the main Fountain Creek Watershed, Flood Control, and Greenway District, and then you have what we call the CAC, the Citizens Advisory Committee, and those are made up of citizens generally. The others are mainly elected officials from the stakeholders that were part of the legislation. Fountain Creek District was formed actually off of state legislation that passed at the state level through the legislature. It was formed, and through that effort, then the board was put together. So there's Pueblo County is involved. El Paso County is involved. The city of Fountain is on there. There's a small municipality seat. I can't remember, is it Keith who's on there now? I can't remember for the small municipality on the main board. But then there's a Citizens Advisory Board as well. I'd like to get on to some other questions too that you may have. But I'm curious, how many of you live on the creek? How many of you have flood insurance? And how many are required to have flood insurance in order to have your mortgage? Have your rates increased a lot? Because I'm curious to know, okay, and in terms of how much?
25%.
Okay. Starting in October, I believe, some of those rates, if you've already been assessed, because of the Homeowners Flood Insurance Affordability Act that was passed at the national level, you should be getting some credits back. But I want you to make sure that Shelley has your name. Anybody with flood insurance and you're seeing an increase in your rates, I want you to make sure that she has your information. And the reason is because we're getting requests to show our legislators at the federal level how it's impacting people here. And your information with NFIP is considered confidential in nature. So we cannot access your records without your permission. So please let us know. Anyone have trouble renewing their fire insurance? Other than we know Ralph, couple folks. We'd also be curious to know what those reasons of renewal problems are. So I'm not going to go into a lot on this right now, but we just need to keep track of this because it's really hard to get information when it's not really available to us. I could get to the information, but then I couldn't really share it with anyone because it's confidential.
Many of us are getting very high rate increases. Like we
And that's what I need to know, because I've had calls in my position as National Association of Counties First Vice President or President-elect. We've been working on this issue at the national level, and we need to put stories with people so that it's not just a faceless rate increase or decrease, it's a person that we're talking about. So whatever you can do to help me with that, that would be great. That was fire, okay.
You know, there's a lot of insurances that are going up. If you got a tree within 50 feet of your house, your insurance is, if you change the insurance or sell a house, then the next owner's not triple what the other rate was if you got a tree within 50 feet of your house.
Yeah, so maybe we could do a survey, RC, maybe we could do some kind of a survey in the area to see if people will share that information with us on whether it's fire or flood and how they're being impacted. Because I think there's a big story, and Ralph Broughton here from the Pikes Peak Bulletin is here to, he's had his own insurance issues. So I want to see if you have questions for the Forest Service or CDOT, so that we don't, because these folks are here tonight.
I just have a general question. We're from Teller County.
Uh-huh.
Are there any officials from Teller County or the city? We are getting zero support up there. You know, and we are the headline. We are the
Yeah.
state of the problem. And many of us have been talking to the county, and we're getting absolutely nothing.
Well, and I've talked to your county commissioners as well. We're hoping to get a meeting together with the Woodland Park City Council members as well as the Teller County commissioners to talk about what we need to do collaboration-wise, because I agree with you. And we all know stormwater does run downhill. Okay. Sorry, the lady in green.
When gas is closed late at night, there is really no safe place for someone to sit for 3 hours or so. In order, we need a place that has a lighted parking lot and a bathroom. Safeway closes at midnight. If the highway's closed after that, there really aren't any options for public buildings aren't open.
You know what, why don't I have Shelley? Shelley's taking notes, so some of your questions. I'm not sure that that's something that CDOT could address.
They told me that they had handed it off to DOT and it's still not there.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's the first time I've heard of that issue. Have you guys heard anything?
No, I mean, honestly, you're talking about when you get sent back to like Woodland Park?
No, if I'm down at below,
Kenny, can you guys come up here?
and I live in Cascade, and the highway is closed, or in my case, I came home from an airplane trip, and it was 10 o'clock at night, and the highway was closed, and I said, safely parking lot for now. Fortunately, the highway opened, but in general, the 30 people who were in the safely parking lot agreed that we need a safe place that's lighted, that has a bathroom, in order to wait for that under 4-hour window that's still remaining.
Yeah, we'd have to do some kind of research to see what we could come up with. Yeah, honestly, didn't know it was an issue.
Yeah, that was the first time I heard it, so we can investigate what we can do.
Thank you.
Maybe have designated areas.
That would be great.
I have wondered about if there's any way the forests that haven't been, they could form, or there could be fire breaks in the national forest.
That's probably a good question. The question was fire mitigation and fire breaks.
In the forest.
Yeah, and so there are significant efforts going on right now. We're implementing our Catamount project is what it's called. We initially, I'm not even sure all different funding sources, but I know people like Denver Water, Colorado Springs Utilities, and other folks, not only the concerns about watershed health, but also for water quality and then eventual erosion and sedimentation into the reservoirs and all. So we've got a really extensive group, also all the nonprofit partners and all the Firewise folks, but certainly I would say that it's been ramping up. And we're actually hiring more foresters, more silviculturists, and more people to get on the ground and do more acres. Some of the area that was affected by the Floodplain fire would have been thinned if we just had a little bit more time. The project we're working on now is the Upper Monument Creek project. you can go onto the Forest Service website, or you can give me a call, and I can point you to more information about it. We've got a couple of public meetings, I think in the spring, so maybe up here. No one's really come because everyone supports the work that we're doing.
I'm familiar with the Catamount thing. I'm under the Cascade and the steep slope.
Right?
Eagle Trail.
And those are the hardest to get to, you bet. And so,
But even the fire work.
and so certainly you can give me a call. I don't have my card, but I'll put you in touch with the foresters, and we'll make sure that you provide input in the public process.
Or even I would like to help organize something for volunteers. Is there any way to do that?
I appreciate it.
Well,
Talk to you afterwards?
and just to let you know too, there's a lot of discussion at the state level. The Wildfire Matters Review Committee that RC and I were at a few weeks ago talked about the different types of mitigation. The Front Range Roundtable is another place where the U.S. Forest Service and local agencies, including county commissioners and folks like Carol from CUSP and others participate in, that there's a lot of discussion about the right technique to mitigate, whether, and some are pretty controversial, but the state is looking at that too with regard to their state public plans. And then obviously there's a lot of, the problem is where it's difficult for the Forest Service because they get essentially inundated with having to suppress fires and then have to rework their budget to prevent the forest fires from happening. So they're trying to do the best job they can, but it is limited resources. But appreciate your thoughts on that. Lady back there.
You mentioned that if you had your insurance canceled because now they're saying it's a fire danger, that you want to know about that, through what venue?
Through getting your information, making sure you sign up or give your information to Shelley Cabot right there in the blue, and we'll get in touch with you. And we need to know the specifics though. And then Amy Bach right behind you, and Ralph Roughton. Right.
So we have basically agreed that we're going to be gathering information together to document the extent of the situation and the areas and the insurance companies, so we can get a handle on it and work with the Division of Insurance for starters.
And welcome Representative Pete Lee as well, who just stopped in. We were talking about, I don't know if you heard the wildfire mitigation conversation, but people were wondering why we don't get up there and prevent those fires from happening in the first place. So I know you're well aware of that. Yes, sir.
Question, we talked about communication and we talked about a text program. The challenge I found, I've only been here 2 weeks now, is, excuse me, I have no cell phone coverage here, nor do I have that in my house, nor do I have that in Green Mountain Falls, nor do I have that in Cascade. Is there a program to add cell phone coverage? Well, my office, business office, is not going to change my home. Is there any other option?
It really, I mean, it really is cell service. I don't know if anybody else has.
Well, you know, so where are you when you need to know this information? Are you at home or are you?
I could be anywhere.
Okay, well, I was just saying we're going to put up that gate project where the gates go down and then there's message boards that go up, the highway's closed or it's open, and so we're trying to put it up at variable message signs. We're trying to get either emails or text, so if you're at home and you have internet, then you may get the email that the highway's closed. Yes, I wish I would have brought some handouts. So it's not easy because it's not an app per se. But if you go to CDOT's website, and I think it's at either cotrip.org is generally where you get the alerts, or coloradodot.info. I think if you go to Google and say CDOT website, there's a little green cell phone icon in the upper right-hand corner. And Bob, do you know if it says anything next to it? It says sign up. Like it says sign up. And you click on that green cell phone and you put in your mobile cell phone number and/or email address, and you, on the alerts, you tell them whether you want text or just email. And it should be able to send it to you there. It's called the governor's delivery system.
Let me add something to that answer, because I think I was the one that brought up about texting, and using less, not overwhelming the cells. There are a lot of places up here that don't have cell phone coverage. And that is a reason to have a plan now to go someplace where you can get to a hardwired phone. Because the majority of these events, our phones still work, but it's a matter of people getting to the phone and letting other people know where they're at. And that's the issue that we deal with at the county, and it's the issue that OEM and search and rescue deals with when people call and say they're missing. We want people to be someplace where we know where they're at. So knowing that you don't have cell phone coverage in these different areas, now would be a good time to plan to, if the highway's closed, to go to some place that you know has a hardwired phone to where you can call, and to where people on the uphill side go to some place where there's a hardwired phone, to where each side kind of knows they're safe, the uphill side and the downhill side. But that's a perfect example, because the reality of it is the cell phone solution is going to be driven by economics. So those towers or technology might be several years in coming, and I mean, John is up here hiking all the time. Shelley and I spend a ton of time up here, and you're in bad cell phone coverage. I know the commissioner carries 2 different carriers for that very reason, and changes as we're driving up the highway. That's a reality, but planning for that now, where you can get to some place that you can call somebody and say, I'm here, I'm at the Safeway parking lot, the lady said, or, you know, one of the staging areas I know people use was Walmart, because it's open 24 hours and it's lit. I don't know how safe that is, but our reality is the county's not building 5 acres of parking lot and lighting it, putting a guard there. I mean, it happens so infrequently. We have to try to collaborate with people that have those facilities already in place. I'm not saying we couldn't use the county parking garage and open up the restrooms. I mean, there's a lot of different options within that. But yours specifically, and then I want you to finish the answer, and then Mr. Harris has had his hand up like 5 times. We have to let him. Thank you. I think she wants to finish this.
I just want to say that we are trying to work, Kenny mentioned, with the radio and the media to help us let people know when it's open again, but I don't have control over that. So, you know, I'm trying to give you ways that CDOT has control over letting you know the highway's open, but we are trying to work with the media to say it's important not just to let people know it's closed, but to also let them know it's open. So if there's TV or radio, again, I don't control that, but we can try and get the information out there. So that's another source.
Who makes the determination on the quarter-inch of rainfall? I'm assuming that's electronically recorded. Is that made in flood level, or?
The determination of the rainfall of how much that is.
I'm assuming
That is a coordination between us, CDOT, and the National Weather Service. After last year's flooding, that was kind of the threshold that we came up with, and that's where we came with that.
Do they issue those like burn scar wide, so to speak? Do they ever consider the east and west side of the burn?
Oh, yes. Yes. I mean, it's one thing that Karen mentioned too is that when we get a flash flood warning, and a lot of times it'll come up that it's El Paso County, we're keeping in close contact with the National Weather Service, and if you ever get those alerts, they'll actually tell you exactly where that flash flood warning is. If it's not showing that flash flood warning is in the burn scar, we're not going to close the highway. And like I said, I've got that National Weather Service, my supervisors do, we got them on speed dial, and when these events are happening, we're talking probably every 5-10 minutes, maybe sometimes sooner than that.
The other thing is the rain gauges that are in the canyons, that are solar powered measured, and the videos that you can monitor to look at sediment flow.
Yes.
In case there's been rain somewhere else where it has been monitored, you have the ability through the United States Geological Service, and those were solar powered cameras. I don't remember if you remember the brief closures for the helicopter back and forth, where they were putting in video surveillance, which obviously at night when it is effective, but during the day they can say, yes, there is a sediment flow, or no, there isn't, because they have a great picture of the sediment going down into Manitou, taking out the exit ramp from 24, and it's nothing but blue sky above it. But there's 1.5 feet of sediment just basically ripping the highway out.
glad, if you're involved in watershed issues, certainly I think a good place to start would be maybe chatting with John afterwards in terms of the plan and also understanding what's been done the last couple of years since the county and the municipalities have been so proactive after the burn.
If you go to waldorecovery.com, you'll find a lot of information that links to a lot of these things that we're talking about. We'll also make sure that the presentation that was here tonight will be placed on that website, so just waldorecovery.com. And there's also a Black Forest recovery page as well. But there should be a lot of information to the various agencies that were here in addition to more. Other questions?
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Hi.
That's the other Sallie Clark.
Yes, I'm the other Sallie Clark. I'm Christo, and up and down the creek from Safeway through Christo to Green Mountain Falls, there's a tremendous amount of debris in the creek bed. Who is responsible for cleaning that? Because your water's not going to get through, it'll be held back, and then suddenly we will have an enormous surge of water. Who is responsible for cleaning the creek bed and getting all that debris out of there?
Truly depends on who the property owner is. And we've dealt with that a lot since the fire, especially since debris coming down the hill. But a lot of times it falls back to the different private property owners.
So
And they
it is
deal with
private.
that a lot in Black Forest too, even though they're so kind of steep, but you have a lot of private property drainage to private property drainage. Along the creek, and John could speak to it more, there's a lot of the property lines that, the property line is the middle of the creek. So each person on each side has kind of a shared responsibility. And to complicate that a little further, I guess from our standpoint, the government agency standpoint, one person can't do something that's gonna make it worse for the other side of the creek. So that's where really these collaborations come in, and you talk about the watershed district trying to pull, kind of like we talked about in Black Forest, and mitigation money, pull property owners together along that creek, so they're not doing things that make it worse for people downstream. You know, we had problems in Manitou, and I know the commissioner was out there with her mud boots on that she keeps in the car, where somebody put jersey barriers in the creek and flooded the person downstream from it. And we're over there like, you know, you can't do that, and have the floodplain manager out there and all kinds of stuff like that, so.
And as Carol will tell you, Carol from Puss, jersey barriers float pretty well too when they get enough water.
Those are also known as mafia blocks, is that correct?
That's a back east term, we don't say mafia blocks out here, okay?
So, you know.
But that's a really complex question, and it requires a lot of collaboration
Okay,
to pull those neighbors together.
also, with that, if a person's property is flooded because of the creek being blocked and the water not being able to move as it should, okay, and it takes out their leach field, and that goes into Fountain Creek, who's responsible? What happens? Is the property owner responsible? Are they fined? What happens in a situation like that?
I'm going to refer that to our storm water person.
So if I understand the correction, the question is, who is responsible in the event that private property washes away because they're too close to the creek? Is that the question?
Well, they weren't too close to the creek. They were way far away from the creek. They lost 10 acres, and it's full of sand now. But now the water is approaching their leach field and their septic system, which is going to go. If we have another big rain, that's going to go. What happens once that goes, and it goes into Fountain Creek, and it goes downstream into Manitou, all of that waste material, what happens? Is the property owner responsible for that? How does that get cleaned up? Are they fined? Who cleans it up? I mean, what happens?
I wish there was a simple, this is the answer, but it obviously depends on whether there was a federal declared a disaster, because then that opens up a lot of funding opportunities and a lot of other what-ifs. But let's just say that doesn't happen, and it's just a rogue storm event, and what you described happens. More than likely, from my understanding of the regulations and the actual enforcement of some of those water quality, the state's not going to come down to you and fine you because your leach field washed away.
Okay.
Certainly, the costs associated with the repair of that are more than likely going to need to be borne by the property owner.
Okay. Now, it's my understanding that Teller County was not declared a disaster area. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, Sue.
And is that still possible to be declared a disaster area? Because I know that
Not this far
everybody-
after the fact, no.
I can tell you, can I say something? With what's the riprap, the concrete, the curb and gutter and sidewalk that's from Safeway to Walmart is spreading the sand out, and all that stuff's gonna be in Green Mountain soon, and everybody's house is gonna be in the creek big time. It's a different problem from this Ute Pass Elementary here up than it is from here down. It's a fire deal from here down, but it's a flood issue from here and up. And look at the asphalt that CDOT's got going through town. And there's only retention ponds that I know of are west of the dollar store to South 40 Road, there by Bluebird.
Sure. You know, I'm gonna tell you the same thing I told you back over there. I can't speak to the land use decisions and how Teller County are making their land use decisions. As far as I know, they could be complying with all the appropriate criteria, and it's a matter of the storm. You know, you can design, and we, as engineers, we design for a 100-year storm typically. You get the 500-year storm, all bets are off. So, you know, no matter what you design to, it can be overcome. So, I can't cast a stone to Woodland Park and say that they're not doing their land use decisions properly. I don't know. And I can't speak to say that what they're doing up there is what's causing the impacts. All I know from my experiences is there's usually not one source. There's usually not one cause. So I think there was also a question about the debris in the concrete plant up there. I've encouraged multiple people to report that facility to the state because that's a regulated facility by the state. I've also encouraged people to talk to the regional floodplain administrator, who is the person responsible for managing activity within the floodplain, and that's activity happening within the floodplain. His name is Keith Curtis, and he's at the Regional Building Development Center down in Colorado Springs. I don't know his phone number off the top of my head, but that's really his role, is to regulate activity into the floodplain.
I'm not looking at this for us there, but it's gonna come here.
I've seen it, and I don't disagree with you. It's all staged, ready to go.
If you don't start with a problem at the source, the soup's gonna hit you in the chin, sure.
To follow up on the lady's question about the septic, when we had the Manitou flood, a lot of those buildings had sewer, had utility, had sewer, sanitary sewers that went over the creek and were ripped out. And they didn't realize it for a couple days. So people continue to use the sanitary sewer and it goes in the creek. Somebody's like, wait a second, something's not right. Those people weren't billed for any damage to the creek. They had to restore those sewer lines. But the other thing they'll say, if you have a flood event like that, there's generally so much volume that a couple individual sanitary sewers or one sanitary sewer system isn't going to affect it long term. There was another question back in the corner.
Yeah, because some of this extreme flooding is impacting the banks of the stream going down, is there any kind of funding to help reinforce those walls? Or is there anything that can be done? You know, because it's just slowly eating away at the land, which is causing more roots to, you know, fall and more tree debris.
We as part of the Waldo Canyon post-fire emergency watershed protection, we did a lot of stream bank restoration. Certainly we didn't have enough money to do everything. So one of the things that we needed to employ in the decision-making process was a cost-benefit analysis. So if I had a house that was in that situation that you're talking about, and the assessed value of that house was $175,000, but to deploy and put the material in there and do the work was $300,000, we walked away from it because the cost benefit didn't pan out. You're not going to spend $300,000 to save a $125,000 house. I mean, I wouldn't do that. I certainly don't want to use public funds to do that kind of. So cost benefit analysis played a large role, and we also looked at impact. If the bank was eroding and there was no indication that actual water was hitting the structure and it looked like water could go somewhere else, well, then that also reduced the priority of a particular situation. But to answer your question, yes, we've done, I don't have the number off the top of my head, but we've done thousands of linear feet of channel bank restoration work. in the Waldo Canyon burn area.
So who's the best contact?
I have a question for Dana. You said you were using aggressive measures to get rid of invasive species of the forest. And what would those aggressive measures be?
Well, first we inventory, just GPS it. And that's actually one of the activities we're still doing out in the Hayman Fire. So we get, for us, a pretty good amount of money for weed spraying. So we have a weed spraying contractor that either has it on his ATV or backpack sprayer or whatever, but they get out to these difficult to reach areas and spray the weeds.
And what do they spray?
I'm not sure, but I definitely have the person's name that can answer that. But they do have different measures of success, if that's what you're wondering.
No, I'm wondering about the runoff from the area.
Oh, no, it's 100%. It definitely, if we're close enough to a water source, there are prescriptions that we have in place. That's just standard contract for U.S. Forest Service, that if we're within a certain distance of a water body, we use, yes, a safe one.
Along the same lines, are you working with El Paso County noxious weeds, or are you a separate entity, or how do you connect the governments?
Well, we do have a slightly more stringent noxious weed. There's some that are on the state list, there's a federal list, and I think there's like a regional list. So you're right, there are different levels of noxious weed. I'm not an expert on it, but I'll take my best guess, and I know for certain, for example, cheatgrass, that was something that came in our straw in the Hayman Fire, and it wasn't on the state noxious weed list, but you bet we think that it's noxious weed, so now we have to get special testing for that cheatgrass. So,
Well, case in point, who does it? Because we get notices from the county about noxious weed. Used to be they would cut it along the side of the street. This last time they came, they sprayed it. I said, please, wait a minute. We got Watershed here that's going to go right through, and I'll be darned. 2 weeks, our horses started going down hill.
no,
And
really.
so Forest Service, I mean, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, we definitely have pretty stringent regulations on what we're applying out there, and those are national standards that are compliant with the Clean Water Act, and I guarantee that that contractor would not be coming back if there was any funny
But what
business.
you do separately.
Oh, yes, we do. We only make decisions, only have decisions based on that green colored land, and we only, certainly, I'm looking at cumulative effects. That's why I'm here collaborating with all these different people, is because we have to work together with CDOT, with NRCS and the private land, everything else. But you bet that we only administer contracts and control what's happening up on federal managed land.
Okay, another question.
Sure.
It was mentioned about Army Corps of Engineers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a native of Colorado. One of the things that we always learned was prevention. And I was under the presumption that the Army Corps of Engineers was doing preventative maintenance of the forest. And we're finding out, Army Corps of Engineers there's only about 2 people, no heavy equipment, and pretty much they signed permits. National Guard was standing locked and loaded and ready to go, but they have the heavy equipment. They were not necessarily, they pulled into the boulder situation.
Yeah, I'm not sure what branch of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers would be working on the ground in that capacity. They're generally a regulatory agency, and the capacity that I work with, maybe Dave or someone else can speak to this, or one of you folks, but definitely I've worked for the Corps of Engineers. That was my first job out of school, and we did do restoration work adjacent to dams that we, I guess, owned, for lack of a better term, or where we
Heavy
had,
equipment?
oh yeah, and where we had directly impacted stuff, but it had to be a Corps of Engineer built project. So
But is that true now?
I'm sure it would be, but that wouldn't apply to this sort of event. It wouldn't apply for preventative.
I was the person that mentioned the Corps of Engineers, and what they're helping our office at the state is getting more technical information. So we're flying LiDAR to get very detailed topographic information, so our technical experts can do more engineering analysis if needed and understand how the watershed is changing. So that was what I specifically referred to earlier in terms of what the Corps of Engineers is doing with us. So
They did not hate it.
No, this is all about trying to get that important information that helps local folks to do the analysis of this.
And I can visit with you more afterwards if you want.
Other questions?
I have one question. Was Teller County, were any of the officials or the Woodland Park invited to this meeting?
Yeah,
By
I
specific
did,
invitation?
I don't know if we specifically, I let them know that there was going to be a meeting. I don't know that we got that out directly to Woodland Park City Council.
Don't you believe that there should be, since we have all of this cooperative measures between agencies and everything, don't you think El Paso County and Teller County should be working together regarding this mitigation? So, because it's obviously, and of course, there is no all, but a lot of it is coming down from Woodland Park, and a lot of the problems in the creek are originating up there. Don't you think that all both counties should be working together?
Yeah, and I won't say that we aren't, because we are in conversation. We haven't actually had an official meeting, as I said before, with the Woodland Park City Council. I realize they have a new mayor in office now, and the county commissioners, I've spoken with all three of them with regard to our joint issues along Fountain Creek, and they do agree that we do need to meet. About the meeting tonight, too, just to let you know, our distribution list for the media included the newspaper that's up in Woodland Park as well, and I know they're on our list. In fact, Pat Hill was here tonight. So, you know, we're trying to get the word out that this, if you have a concern from Teller County, please come here too, because we knew CDOT was going to be there. I don't know what outreach efforts they're going to do up there. I'm assuming that you guys have been up there in the Woodland Park, Teller County area to talk to their commissioners and their city council as well about the closure operations. But it brings up a good point, Sally. I'll try and do a better job of making sure we reach out to them.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah. One thing I did want to mention too, there's a lot of talk about things coming down the creek. Be aware too that everything you put in the creek could affect your neighbors downstream. Because right after some of the floods, when our CNI went up to Green Mountain Falls, people had made makeshift driveways across the creek with a piece of pipe that they'd found in the creek, and then just poured gravel over the top of it so they could get to the other side. And while I realize there's a necessity to want to get to the other side of the creek when your house is over there and you want to park your car on that side, the next rainstorm that hits might wash all of that down, and then you've just wasted your money and you've impacted your downstream neighbors. So that is one of the things I think from an individual standpoint you need to be cautious about. We are going to try and get a better relationship going with Teller and Woodland Park, because I do think, again, water is running downhill and it's affecting all of you down here. And this isn't all necessarily fire related. So
No, it isn't.
I know that upstream is, as you all pointed out. Other questions for the experts that are here? And then I'd like to see if Representative Lee has any comments he'd like to make as we wrap this up. Yes, ma'am. Invited tonight. I don't know if Shelley did the invitations. I'm not sure we invited Cuss tonight. We did not. Yeah, they have been at previous meetings though, and they've been an incredibly wonderful partner. We talk to them weekly, daily, sometimes. It just depends.
You can get food for them?
Did what?
You can get food for them?
Representative Lee, was there anything you wanted to add? I realize this isn't necessarily your district, however, Manitou Springs sure is, so.
Thank you, Commissioner. Can you hear me okay? Sure. Thank you, Commissioner, for bringing all these people together with the players and the ones who are really working on trying to solve this problem. I'm Pete Lee. I represent House District 18, which begins at the western end of Manitou and goes over to Academy. So as Commissioner Clark said, this isn't my district, but what you send downstream comes into my district. So we're literally all in this together. We're connected. And we really have to work with all the team of people from federal, state, local, county level to address these problems. I commend you all for being here to answer these questions, and I encourage the citizens to stay in contact with the officials who have the power, authority, and capability to solve the problems or get you in touch with people that can, because we want to work on this and we want to try to help you to get your lives back to normal. So thank you. We're here to help you.
Yeah, and those of you who left email addresses, we'll try and get some of these links out to you so that you can then access it more easily in case you need to take notes. Any other last minute?
I have one last question. Our city and a group of officials came out and looked at the creek that's on our rental property, that there's a lot of debris in the creek, and I was curious as to what the solution to our problem is.
We were up there last week, and I don't know that we come up with a final solution. Somebody else has to over here. Sometimes that becomes a private property issue. We just try to have to encourage the private property owner to remove the debris. Your specific situation where trees have washed out and those root balls are in the creek obviously make it much more expensive to do. One of the things that we were going to talk about it with some of our partners afterwards, and actually I should have the commissioner talk about it because it was her idea, but was soil cleanup day. I'll let you take it from there. Because we went back and reported to the commissioner about what we'd seen in that one stretch right below the camp.
Well, and one of the things we were going to try and do, at least to familiarize our legislators, was to work with CUSP and some of our partners to see if we could do sort of a demonstration of being a sawyer, sawing down trees, the extensive work that's involved in some of this mitigation, you know, and I know you all know it, but I'll just say it again, it's not an easy job. Some of these, even if you look at CUSP, yes, they have volunteers, but they use big, heavy equipment to get these projects done, and they're multi-million dollars in some cases to get these projects completed. So we were trying to figure out some interesting and clever ways to encourage our state representatives, our state senators, even our congressional delegation members to get here to see what it's like to be the boots on the ground that are actually doing some of this mitigation work. And we thought about, so if you come up with some ideas that you think might be an interesting way, I know that at the national level, we've talked about there in Utah, they get ATVs and they take their delegation, their congressional delegation out to talk about the importance of public lands. And I'll bet you those folks show up because they get to ride an ATV into the areas that they normally don't go to talk about the importance of public lands and fire mitigation and payment in lieu of taxes, which is a big issue if you have a county that's got a lot of public lands with no tax base. So if you think of ways to draw folks in to really get an education and make it a little bit fun to learn about the difficulties that we face and the importance of this issue, I would appreciate you coming up with some of those ideas. Terry?
I can't let this opportunity pass to tell you that your county commissioner, after we had done a dedication of the new segment of the Ute Pass Trail, Commissioner Clark took me around, and we spent a good hour plus going to every location, getting out and walking where the erosion is, what the planned mitigation is, short-term, long-term, throughout the Cascade Green Mountain Falls area. So we have trumped all of that ground, and I am following that. And obviously, I am not in any official capacity until after Election Day, and once I'm sworn in. But I can tell you that the flooding and the wildfire issues, I will be at as many meetings as I can. You're welcome to email me or call me. This is a huge issue for me. And
Look at explain your district.
The House District 20 is west of I-25, but it is huge. It reaches all the way north
Cedar Heights and Crystal Park, and then he's generated that.
Yes, and we will, exactly. So, Representative Lee, of course.
That would be the other guy.
But, I will be, since I'm running unopposed in November, your representative, assuming at least one person votes for me. My husband and I thought we'd at least do that. I would make a clear vote too. But please do, and I would be glad to hand you a card with my email, website, phone number is on my card, also on my website. So let's be in conversation. And I am trying to plug in local, state, and federal. So Terry Carter, so we can work this problem.
One thing I wanted to clarify, when we were on your property looking, and we'd spent a lot of time in the last 2 weeks, we were compiling an unmet needs list for the commissioner in the state when we talk about the second round of the block grant development, and trying to see if we fit into any category, like 7 different categories. One of them was resilience, and that's kind of a key word. So that was one of the things we were doing to see if we could find a source of funding and do some of the work that needs to be done. And again, it is on the research.
That's R.C. Smith. Actually, all right, well, thank you all for being here. If you have follow-up questions, you know where I live, down at the county office building, so feel free to email me, to call and leave me a message, or we'll get this information to you if you left email addresses for us tonight. If you didn't leave an email address and you still want to sign up, it's not too late to do that. Hopefully we've answered some of your questions. It's certainly not a perfect science. It's we have natural disasters that have befallen us, and some that were maybe man-made disasters, but it's still creating natural disasters after that, and what we call that rolling disaster, I think John Chavez said at one point. So thanks for coming tonight, and don't hesitate to let us know if we can help in any way. Thank you.